Okay, call to order the Harbor Commission meeting of January 19th. Would you call the roll, please, Mary?
Betsy Kramer.
Present.
Bill Spicer. Here. Corey Bantalan. Here. Eric Friedman. Here. Frank Kelly.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Helene Webb. Here.
Are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Friedman?
Madam Chair, we have one minor change. We would like to take public comment after the Harbor Commission matters of seating the new commissioners.
Seating of new commissioner Helene Webb and reappointment of Frank Kelly to the commission. Both commissioners have been appointed to serve four-year terms expiring on December 31st, 2015.
Welcome, Frank, again, and welcome, Helene Webb. Would you, either of you, like to say anything?
It's just an honor to be here.
No. Thank you.
Just a little bit of background for the new commissioner, particularly Captain Webb has a Bachelor of Arts in Fine Arts. She graduated from the Maritime Institute and holds a 100-ton U.S. Coast Guard master's license. She's a graphic artist and a sailing instructor and a member of the Santa Barbara Yacht Club and the Women's Racing Association, among other organizations. She's been a slip holder and member of the harbor community for 15 years, and for 10 of those years was a sailing charter operator under our business activity charter permit program. So she's quite familiar with that, and we've worked together over the years on that program. So with that, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming Ms. Webb to the commission, and if you have anything else to add. Okay, and obviously Commissioner Kelly has been with us for 9 years, but needs little in the way of introduction. He's served as chairman of the commission for an unprecedented 7 of those 9 years. Must be a glutton for punishment, but he's signed up for another 4. So Frank's back with us. He's also served on various Harbor Commission committees, including the Budget Committee, the Dredging Committee, and the Non-Navigable Vessels Committee. So Frank, welcome back, even though you never left. And if you have anything to add? Nothing. Okay, thank you.
And next will be the approval of the minutes. Excuse me? This would be the time there would be public comment if anyone were to make comments on items which are not on the agenda. Seeing none, we close the public comment. And next is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Second that.
Minutes approved and moved and seconded. They are approved. So oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot my agenda this evening. Can we have a vote on that, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm abstaining since I wasn't here.
So 6 in favor and 1 abstention. The next will be the department update. And could we have the director's report, Mr. Friedman, please?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, the first item has to do with the Department of Boating and Waterways, which held their biannual meeting in our fine city on Wednesday at the Harbor View Inn. Prior to the meeting, Carl Mick and I had the opportunity to tour the harbor and some of the project sites with 3 of the Department of Boating and Waterways staff members and 4 of the DBAW commissioners. We went to the harbor launch ramp where 2 projects are pending and haven't broken ground yet. Took a patrol boat over to the Marina One project site, walked the entire length of Marina One with the commissioners and staff. And then we went out to Marina 5, out to the Anchorage area, to discuss the abandoned watercraft abatement grants that we've been receiving over the years and the newer vessel turn-in grant program that Santa Barbara has made full use of those 2 grant programs. So that's quite a bit right there that we've been getting from the Department of Boating and Waterways. We enjoyed perfect weather that day and lunch at the Harbor Restaurant afterwards. The commissioners and the staff expressed strong support for the Santa Barbara projects and the way the harbor is being operated and managed. So it was really a nice opportunity to meet with the staff and the commissioners. And the actual meeting was held the next day on the 18th, Wednesday, at the Harbor View Inn. And I apologize for the late notice on inviting the commission. it slipped through the cracks and wasn't even brought up until we were out on the boat in the anchorage, and the chair of the Department of Boating and Waterways Commission said, hey, let's invite the harbor commissioners. So one day's notice wasn't quite enough, so we'll do better next time. So that's the good news. However, Governor Brown's recently released budget proposes to eliminate the Department of Boating and Waterways and shift its duties and responsibilities to the, or I should back up, eliminate the Department of Boating and Waterways, which is an enterprise fund, and shift the duties and responsibilities over to the State Parks and Recreation Department, which is a general fund of the state. This is, of course, of concern to department staff and marina operators all across the state. We've drafted a letter for the mayor's signature to the Governor Brown with copies to Assembly Member Doss Williams and Tony Strickland. I gave you each a copy of that tonight so you could have that for reference. Boating associations throughout the state, of course, are doing the same thing. This is not the first time this has happened, that there's been a push from the governor to move funds or move the Department of Boating and Waterways into the parks, merge it with the Parks and Recreation Department. This is the proposed budget. It has steps to go through before it gets approved. So we'll hopefully this will not happen, and we will keep the commission apprised of any developments as we become aware of them. In terms of council action, since we last convened, the council approved a 5-year license agreement with Santa Barbara Water Taxi for the Little Toot water taxi business. The council approved a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Stearns Wharf Bait and Tackle, and a 5-year lease agreement with Stearns Wharf, Inc., doing business as Old Wharf Trading Company, and also approved a 5-year lease with a 5-year agreement with Sushi Go-Go, adopted a resolution relating to the annual destruction of records held by the Waterfront Department in accordance with the city's adopted records retention schedule. We're required to purge those periodically. And also the council awarded a contract with Shaw Contracting, Inc. for the construction of the launch ramp boating trails project. And tentative agenda items for the February meeting would be, once again, we're going to try and get the UCSB sailing lease in front of you and the lease with Mike Peisel, the local marine surveyor. And that concludes the department update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eidman. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Sloan?
So what would happen to the loans and the grant process if Department of Boating and Waterways became part of Parks and Rec? Would the staff from Department of Boating and Waterways move over there and would still be working with the same people, or is it too early to tell, or do you have any insight on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I believe it is too early to tell. In terms of our loan, we have contractual agreements in place, so we're confident that we'll get at least what has been promised us so far. It does, open a question as to what future loan installments might entail, whether they keep the programs intact at Parks and Recreation or they eliminate them is unknown. And the grants, too, the ones that we have locked up right now, I'm sure are a done deal. But in terms of future grants, it's anyone's guess at this point.
Is Parks and Rec with the state like it is here in the city a general fund, or is that an enterprise fund as well? Do you know?
That's correct. Parks and Recreation is a general fund department.
Any other questions? I have one question. I assume that you've taken out to Marina One and saw the excellent new marina.
Yes, Madam Chair. One of the commissioners, Commissioner Metz, this is his third site visit down here. He's been a real strong supporter. He is not generally a proponent of concrete docks, but has said that the docks, we've won him over on the issue of concrete docks, was his statement. They're very pleased with the progress in Marina One.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treiber. Next is the business services report. Is that Mr. Eidman?
Back to me. Yes, the department began advertising office space at 132B Harbor Way back in September, and those are the offices that are immediately adjacent to the Waterfront Department offices on the west side of the building on the second floor above West Marine. They consist of about 734 square feet of leasable space, which includes 5 small offices and the interior hallway as well. we issued a request for proposals indicating the business terms and that a potential lease priority would be given to an ocean-related use as dictated by the municipal code and the harbor master plan. And although we did receive 16 inquiries, we only received one proposal by the January 9th deadline. The proposal that was received suggested a sort of a dual-use scenario involving two companies, one of which is called Club Travel, which, as they said in the proposal, assists in the sale of individual, family, and group cruise line vacations. And then the other branch of this two-branch company would be an outfit called RepresentYou.com, which is a certified lawyer referral service. So this is kind of interesting in that it parallels where we were last year with the Stearns Wharf coastal cruising concession. It was the same sort of November, December, January time period where we advertised it. We got minimal response. We put it back out. We looked at our business terms, refined our advertising a little bit, reissued the proposal, and got better results the second time around. And that's what we're recommending at this time. So after consultation with the RFP committee, Commissioners Sloan, Bantolin, and Spicer, staff recommended rejecting the proposal and putting it back out there to take a second try like we did with the wharf concession. So that's what has been done. The Club Travel and Represent You folks were here earlier tonight talking with Patrick and myself. They're still interested in participating in the next phase. So we'll see what that brings us. So other than that, the offices are currently occupied, but they have given notice and should be vacated by the end of this month. So we'll get a chance to get in there and clean things up and get it ready to show. And that concludes the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I guess with no questions, we move on to the Harbor Operations Report. Mr. Conman.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Well, we got lucky again with the Parade of Lights. About 4 hours before a potent winter storm, 28 boats hit the seas and decorated to the theme of Candy Cane Holidays. It was absolutely flat, calm, glassy, starry night. It was the fates were on our side this time. It was a lovely, lovely evening, a great parade, a great celebration afterwards at the Maritime Museum for the awards party. Channel Cat walked away with a grand prize. They were lit up like Las Vegas in the desert and had beautiful, beautiful setup. And so there's really nothing more to say than it was a fantastic show. And afterwards, we had a fireworks display with a new vendor, Bay Fireworks, and they provided an excellent 5-minute show, and will probably be a strong contender in the bidding process for the 4th of July fireworks. And it's always never too late to mark your calendars for the next Parade of Lights. So if you've got your 2012 calendars out, folks, December 9th, 2012, we're going to do it again with the exact same kind of weather. On the conservation front, you've heard me mention many times about the implementation of the Marine Life Protection Act. As you no doubt recall, that was a state legislation passed in 1999 that mandated the implementation of no-take marine protected areas along the California coast. And finally, after 2 years of interest group negotiations and discussion and thousands of public comments, the California Fish and Game Commission voted to implement a series of marine protected areas throughout Southern California, and that implementation took effect on January 1st. I put copies of the marine protected areas in your packet as an attachment. I elected not to put them up as a slide tonight because, as you can tell, they're very busy with coordinates and what have you. I primarily put them in here for your edification, and so the public would have the ability to link directly to these by going on our website. They can also find these maps on the Fish and Game's website, the file path for which I included in the staff report. And finally, we have copies at our office, courtesy of Santa Barbara Channel Keeper provided us the template, and we have plenty of copies at our office, and they're also up on Marina Gates. They're hard to keep up on the Marina Gates. People keep taking them down and putting them on their boats, but we'll do our very best to keep them up there so everybody remains informed. Regarding the fishing fleet, you know, it's still up in the air relative to what the impacts ultimately might be on the recreational and commercial fishing fleets in our region. There'll be big closures up at Point Conception and a major one between Campus Point and the Devereaux Slough, and Naples Reef. The whole reef system there will be off limits, is off limits as of January 1st. One can hope that there will be a relocation and readjustment in the fleets, much the same as there was at the Channel Islands when about 7 years ago, the marine protected areas were established at the Channel Islands. But it remains to be seen, number one, the efficacy of this entire effort, and it remains to be seen what the shift in effort will mean relative to like the catch rates for fishermen who are relocating, and how resources that have not been hit as hard as they might be due to that external kind of consequence will hold up. But all of that will be in the mix in the upcoming years. I'm sure there'll be a 5-year review. There's monitoring going on as we speak. There's enforcement and education being undertaken by the California Department of Fish and Game. So we're just headed into a new era here of marine protected areas in our region, and we have every hope that it will have the conservation benefits that's proposed, and will have minimum impact on our consumptive interests. Speaking of fish, in a different kind of context, you may remember that I've spoken to you on occasion about algal blooms and how they have caused minor to moderate fish die-offs in Santa Barbara Harbor. Typically, those have been very manageable for us. One time, about 8 years ago, we had to put a skiff and some crews into action with some nets to scoop some fish off the bottom and get the seafloor and the edges of the harbor cleaned up until this natural event sort of corrected itself. But last March, our eyes were really opened when I think most of us read about it down in King Harbor in Redondo. 175 tons of sardines wedged themselves in a big shoal in King Harbor and died. And the staff and the boaters walked out one beautiful spring morning to find that, and it was quite an effort to get that cleaned up. But it also got agencies like ours thinking about, maybe these minor events are a precursor to a major event, and what would we do if there was a major fish die-off in Santa Barbara Harbor? And so both the waterfront director and myself spoke about this and ultimately communicated with the city administrator and our emergency services manager, and we thought there might be some wisdom in crafting a fish die-off emergency response plan. And since we would be starting from scratch and probably scratching our heads, quite frankly, to start with something like that, we realized the first step should be to go down and talk to the folks in Redondo. So Scott and I went down in December and met personally with the fire captain / harbor master, who was extremely gracious with his expertise and his time, and he spent several hours with us walking us through step by step how they approached the crisis, if you will, and how they dealt with it. To make a long story short, in that regard, they treated it like any other disaster. He leaned on his fire training, on his first responder training, and they went about arranging their response as you would any other emergency. That is, with a SEMS sort of structure, the same way we're organized in the city for emergency response. SEMS standing for the Systematic Emergency Response System, or anyway, it's where we have a planning section, planning and intelligence section, an operations section, a PIO section, and they all are organized in a manner where they flow between the field operations and an emergency center where the PIO functions and logistics, getting people the resources they need to handle the disaster, are all done in that kind of model. It worked very, very well from them all the way to the end result with waste haulers taking hundreds of tons of sardines all the way to Victorville, to a landfill in Victorville. So since then, I've been talking with the emergency services manager. I've just recently talking to our environmental health services manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and get in place all of the parts of this puzzle that we can before the sardines come in a big shoal into Santa Barbara Harbor, so that if and when that happens, we're able to pull the plug, and forgive the expression, and get this plan into motion, including scientists, ichthyologists can come in and assess the fish, waste haulers who are prepared to deal with it, compost facilities and waste receiving facilities that can take the fish, and so that we're organized and we get ahead of it quickly, because when that stuff comes into the harbor, it starts to go off, if you will, within a couple of days, and the key is acting quickly and acting systematically. So we're headed down that road. We hope to have a response plan complete and added to our suite of emergency response plans at the waterfront by the end of the year. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your report, Mick, and Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you, Mick. I have two questions. First, on the MLPA, is there any enforcement issues or effects for our harbor patrol? And then my second question on the fish die-off, and maybe unsavory, but is there any value with the byproduct from a die-off? Maybe not commercial value, but is there any value in the fish remains?
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, first to your first question, the Harbor Patrol doesn't have a direct role in terms of it, even though in its police powers we can, they can arrest people for fish and game violations. We typically don't. But what we do is we work hand in glove with the Department of Fish and Game. If the Department of Fish and Game needs information relative to boats that are in the harbor, we're a ready and willing partner in that regard. And also, if they have an investigation underway, and they need to be alerted to the comings and goings of vessels and that kind of thing, we partner with them on that level as well. Regarding your second question, from the experience in Redondo, the only commercial value we could see was through the composting value, if you will. It really doesn't appear that fish that shoal into a harbor like that and die, because they start to decay in such a rapid fashion. There was no discussion, really. It wasn't even considered using them for direct food value in Redondo, though, to be quite honest with you, this actually speaks to perimeter control, because there were some folks came down from some local area restaurants through their vans, with their refrigerated vans, and they had to be turned away the best the authorities could do. So I guess the answer is no for a direct food value, and yes for an ultimate food value if we get it composted.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't thinking food, but maybe more fertilizer, but thank you.
Commissioner Friedman.
Regarding the fish die-off, just a request, maybe you were planning already, but when the plan is done, can you put it as an agendized item just to go over it so we know what it is?
I'd be happy to.
Commissioner Bantalan.
Just on the Parade of Lights, I wanted to echo your comments. I think it was a fantastic event, and I just want to say thank you to Conway Wineries for also hosting the party for the judges, commissioners, and other guests, and it was a great fireworks show as well.
Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. And also a tip of the hat to the Stearns Wharf Business Association, the Harbor Merchants Association, and the Maritime Museum. Because we do this so often, I sometimes forget to mention all our partners in this, but it's a team effort, and they really they extended a great hand in this.
I have a question, Mick, in terms of the fish die-off. Have they found what was the cause at all, any place?
The assumption that they were operating on from their scientists, in Redondo, was that it was a result of an algal bloom. There were traces of domoic acid found in the fish. It's a little bit difficult when you get into the cause and effect aspect of this. Because what happens is there may be an algal bloom that robs the water column of oxygen, which makes the fish begin to suffocate, and once the fish suffocate and begin to die, that sets off another bacterial event which itself absorbs more oxygen, and it begins to feed on itself. But generally it was assumed to be an algae event that lowered the dissolved oxygen in the water column and caused the die-off.
Thank you. I didn't realize that domoic acid actually caused the death of fish. I know it does with birds and sea mammals, but that's interesting.
There were traces of domoic acid. As I say, a cause and effect, one can't be sure. I wouldn't want to be the one who goes on record and says domoic acid was the cause of that die-off.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Commissioner Webb.
Thank you for your report, Mick. In your fish die-offs plan, will you be utilizing volunteers as well?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, thank you for asking. Volunteers are actually the cornerstone of the response plan. Excuse me. It was the CERT volunteers, the community emergency response team volunteers, excuse me, that really came to the rescue in Redondo. There were, I think, what did they say, Scott, 600 or 700 of the volunteers. It came down to buckets and nets and getting it onto the hardscape and scooping it up with front loaders and getting it into bins. It was because you could have probably herd them up in a net, but fishermen could, and take them out to sea, but then they'd end up on the beaches of our neighbors to the east of us in Montecito. That'd probably be a bad thing too. So they actually had to get it up really it came down to rudimentary work of getting into with buckets and nets, buckets with holes drilled in them, 5-gallon buckets, and scoop nets. And we're lucky we already have all those scoop nets down at the harbor. And trust me, we will have plenty of buckets before long. But it was the volunteers that really made the difference. And I've already talked to the emergency services manager, and we have a CERT Corps here, and we have a very strong CERT Corps in Carpinteria, and they will all be part of the plan and the working up of the plan.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? I guess we move on to new business. Item number 6, the lease agreement with Barbara Sonia Adams, doing business as Madam Rosinka. Mary, could you read the staff recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with Barbara Sonia Adams, doing business as Madam Rosinka at 221B Stearns Wharf at a rent of $750 per month.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Madam Rosinka is practically an institution in Santa Barbara. I would go so far as to say she's an institution on Stearns Wharf. Madam Rosinka has been licensed by the city since 1951, and that's older than I am. It's a family-run operation. You can call for an appointment, or after lunch, simply drop by the quaint little parlor located out there. Right around the corner from the ice cream shop, you'll find the big hand on the side of the building. Their winter hours, they're closed Mondays, and they're open from 12 to 5, but they are available by appointment. So if you get off work late, give them a call, and they'll meet you. Their summer hours a little bit later, 12 to 6, again closed on Mondays, but again available by appointment. Feel free to give them a call. They are prompt with their rent payments and are considered a tenant in good standing. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Pat. Do we have to do anything specific to recommend to the City Council on this, or is this? Yeah, okay. All right, so all right. Approve. Do we?
I'll make a
Commissioner
motion
Vanderland?
to approve.
Okay, second. All in favor? Vote?
Aye.
Unanimous, we approve. Recommend the City Council approval of the 5-year lease agreement with Barbara Sonia Adams. On to new business item number 7, the office lease for Ty Warner Sea Center. Would you read, please, the staff recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History's Ty Warner Sea Center for a second-floor office space at 219E Stearns Wharf at an initial rent of $610 per month.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The Ty Warner Sea Center has rented the 205-square-foot space since December of 2004, and they've used this room primarily for storage and an occasional meeting. The Sea Center is bursting at the seams, if you've probably seen the whale in there. This room has proven to be of great value for them, even though access is somewhat limited. They have to walk through the maintenance office and through the locker room in order to gain access, but they appreciate the space nonetheless. The Sea Center is prompt with their rent payment and is considered a tenant in good standing. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Motion to recommend to the City Council?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a motion. So we move on now. The next item is item number 8, the fiscal year 2012 mid-year budget review. Mary, would you read the recommendation, please?
That Harbor Commission receive and review a status report on the Waterfront Department fiscal year 2012 mid-year budget reviews and expenditures.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, each January, as part of the overall budget process, we like to bring forward to the Commission a report of their mid-year budget performance. The fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we look at our revenues and expenditures as of December 31st and forecast out how we think the rest of the year is going to go, and that's where we base our future year budget projections on. Then a similar report goes up to the Finance Department for their review, and then subsequently to the City Council Finance Committee for their review. This is the first table in your staff report. It shows the year-end revenue projection, or forecast, if you will. We use a seasonally weighted average to come up with the forecast. And this is because since the fiscal year starts on July 1st, the year starts off with the busiest summer months, July and August. So we find that we see more revenue in the first half of the year than the second half of the year, particularly in the property management and parking programs. Property management will typically see 56% of the revenue in the first 6 months, parking a little less, 52% or so. And marina management, it's pretty much 50-50. So you can see the forecast variance in dollars and percentage on the right side of the table there. Property management, we're expecting $160,000 positive variance by year end if the pattern continues. $23,000 negative variance in the financial management program, and that's the interest generated by our reserves. Parking services is right on target, about $9,000 positive variance, minimal variance there. And marina management is projected to finish the year about $244,000 to the positive, above budget. So the total amount would be about 3.3% above budget by year end, or $390,000. This is good news. As you may recall, last year we finished the year approximately $200,000 under budget for the first time in memory. So it looks like we're having a better year than last year. This slide, although it looks similar, is a different way of looking at the data. This is not a forecast. This simply compares the current fiscal year to date revenue with last year's fiscal year to date revenue, July 1st to December 31st this year compared to last year. And again, you can see the variances are similar. Property management, the variance is up over last year. Financial management is down over last year. Parking services and marina management are up. So we're about, at mid-year, $484,000 above where we were this time last year. So again, another good trend we're observing here. It's primarily due to the wharf food service and wharf commercial rents being above what they were last year. The wharf seems to be improving at the moment. The biggest variation that we're seeing is in the marina management program, and that's the slip transfer fee revenue. This is a mid-year comparison since 2004, and it graphically illustrates what's been going on with our slip transfer fee revenue. You can see the steady climb from 2004 to 2008, and then the sharp dive in fiscal year 2009, a rebound in 2010, and a drop again in 2011, and then here we are in 2012, and we're tracking back up again. So this really illustrates the volatility and the unpredictableness of relying on these slip transfer fee revenues is something we can really bank on. So we've revised our budget projections based on that. And this is just another example. The red bars show the mid-year revenue results, and the bluish bars show the year-end results. And typically, over an 8-year average, we would receive 49% of the slip transfer fee revenue during the first 6 months of the year. So it's about a 50-50. But there's no predicting it again. We've gone as low as 42% or as high as 57%. So again, pretty hard to forecast at mid-year. We could have a bunch of slip transfers come through, or they might not have another one by the end of the year. It just really depends. Very variable. Moving on to the expenditure side of the equation. This table is also included in your staff report. It shows the 9 programs that the Waterfront Department consists of. You'll notice, or you may have noticed, that some of the programs appear to be over 50% expended at mid-year. But at the bottom right-hand corner, highlighted in yellow, you can see overall the department's 56% expended or encumbered. Encumbered is the key word there, and this will tend to balance out by year end. The reason for that is, again, the encumbrances. We have $777,000 in encumbrances, which are monies that are essentially promised and encumbered at the beginning of the fiscal year or during the fiscal year, but they're expended throughout the year. So this is like janitorial contracts is the one I always refer to, Work Incorporated. It's a $220,000 contract. It's encumbered at the beginning of the year, but expended month by month. So it appears on these spreadsheets like it's already been spent when that's not actually the case. So the figures also include a $467,000 transfer from the operating fund to fund capital projects and $582,000 or 84%, most of the fiscal year 2012 principal payment on our debt service. So this all has the effect of front-loading the expenditures as of December 31st. And I believe if you back out the encumbrances, we're about 49% expended, or right on track. As far as the principal on the debt service, that's because our certificates of participation, the entire principal is due on October 1st and half of the interest. And on our Department of Boating and Waterways loan, the entire principal and interest is due on August 1st. So that, again, you can see how that would front-load the expenditure side of the budget. So just to wind things up, the upcoming budget process over the next 2 months should be relatively simple. This is because the council approved a 2-year budget last June, including fiscal year 2013 fees and expenditures. So it's basically a status quo budget. It'll consist of a mid-cycle review. It's the first time we've done a 2-year budget in some time. So it'll consist of a mid-cycle review with minor adjustments to the estimated revenue and expenditures, which we'll submit to the Finance Department on a spreadsheet and have them adjust our 2013 expectations accordingly. And again, it should be fairly streamlined. We will report this out to the Commission as we go, but our expectations are, well, we just received the budget instructions on Friday, the 13th, from Finance and the Administration. We will likely convene a meeting of the Harbor Commission Budget Committee in February sometime. I will take to heart Commissioner Kelly's request to allow enough time between the Budget Committee review and the actual approval of the budget so that the suggestions can be incorporated and discussed. It's difficult with this compressed time frame that we get. We used to get our budget instructions in December, and now we're getting them in mid-January, so it seems like it gets squished each year. Again, any kind of adjustments we'll review with the Commission at the February and March meetings, and we do have an appointment with the City Administrator to review the budget on February 27th, and an appointment with the Council Budget Work Session on May 2nd. So that concludes the mid-year budget review and the sort of the upcoming budget process, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. Are there any questions, comments? Commissioner Friedman.
Scott, I was wondering, this last year we moved in some of the parking lots to the automated system, and part of the reasoning behind that, it would cut costs and possibly increase revenue. Have we seen any results from that, or any data, initial data that shows that we've achieved the expected results?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, if you look at the line item revenue attachment number 1 on your packet, and you look at the Harbor West under the parking section is the lot where we installed those Luke systems at the very beginning of the fiscal year. And we're pleasantly surprised that seeing consistently the revenue has been up 38% to 40% in that lot over when compared with last year. So we believe that's from increased compliance, more people paying, and so we're pleasantly surprised. Overall, parking's tracking about 11% above last year, but the Harbor West lot is tracking far ahead of that. So I believe that is a result of those new installations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bantalan.
Thanks for your report, Scott. Just had one question on the financial management aspect. It's not a huge number, but I'm curious why there would be such volatility to the tune of 11 to 12% on that on the revenue side. we're down about 11.6% on the financial management. I was just sort of curious why there would be such a variance at this point.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bantlin, the financial management interest projections are given to us by the Finance Department. We don't project those in-house. They do the best they can, but in this economy and the nature of the investments that they do are very conservative, so they generate the least amount of interest because they have to be very conservative according to government accounting principles and standards. So I don't know the exact answer to that. As we go through this process, I can talk with the Treasury Manager, Jill Tara, and get some better information for you at the February or March meetings and get a little better explanation on that.
Thanks. I just think it'd be something to look at maybe for the budget review mid-cycle.
Yeah, in the past, they've always been very conservative, and we've always had $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 more than we expected. In the last 2 years, it's been less than we expected, and I'm not sure why that is.
Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Scott, since slip transfers are a very volatile number, just like our parking things, would it be possible in the future to have a number that runs along with that, which is the actual number of the transfers, so that we can see what the number of transfers really are, and then the percentage of escalation of the fees that we can put against that, so then we can actually see what's really moving the number? Is it just the continual increase that we put into the fees, or how is that working against the number of transfers? I think that will be helpful for the Commission to make a decision.
Commissioner Kelly, we can certainly provide that information.
Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, I have one question along the same lines. If we look at the number of transfers, does it help to look at the new boats coming in versus transfer within a family or partnership or some on a vessel that's already in the slip, and being able to look at some sort of way of predicting sales or yacht sales or something like that, and try and get a handle on that volatility? Is kind of, I'm trying to look for ideas of trying to figure out how to get on that volatility. Obviously, if we know the number of transfers and do what Commissioner Kelly suggested in looking at how much the increase is applied to that, but also if we broke that number down into new boats coming into the harbor versus maybe transfers within a partnership, someone dies, or somehow we get look at how that's broken down, and trying to look at maybe some way of predicting, because that's a very volatile number, obviously, and it always has been. I mean, that's like trying to predict the weather,
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, Mick reminds me here that we have actually this speaks to Commissioner Kelly's question as well, that we actually have a performance measure where we're measuring the number of slip transfers. So we're tracking that on a quarterly basis.
It actually, yeah, it measures the number of slip transactions, transfers, new boats and slips, and what have you. And we can break that out as you described. Just as a reminder, there are essentially, and this will help us help you, there are essentially three kinds of slip transfers. There's a straight transfer where a person buys a boat in a slip and transfers the slip. There's what's called the new boat, new partner transfer, where an individual will buy a new boat, add a boat partner, and the partner drops off, and the new partner ends up with as the slip permittee. And then, of course, there's the just adding somebody onto your slip permit. My brother-in-law wants to be on the slip permit kind of slip transfer. All of those generate a slip transfer fee, and I think with a little bit of digging, we could break those out if that's what you're looking for.
And then do we also look at the size of the transfers? Is that data?
We don't typically track it, but we might be able to go back and look at it. It's not. It would be an interesting exercise, and we can certainly undertake that.
Yeah, just look at the data and see what we can glean from it to try and make the forecasting a little easier, if nothing else. And then I had one other question. What's the miscellaneous revenue under the marina management? That seemed to be up quite a bit.
Commissioner Sloan, what's happening is it's cruise ship visits. and they were budgeted under miscellaneous revenue and property management because the revenue comes through sea landing, which is the debarkation point for the cruise ships. And you can see we're running at 11% there, and we're running at something like 530% over budget, in miscellaneous revenue, marina management. So we believe that's attributable to the 2 cruise ship visit payments that we have received so far this fiscal year. We believe they were inadvertently booked to the wrong account, and we can get that straightened out. And then we have 2 more invoices pending. Hopefully we'll get them to the correct account. So that's what you're seeing going on there. Jumps out like a red flag.
Yeah, I just didn't, I didn't know the other side of that coin, obviously, so thanks.
Any other questions, comments? No. Thank you very much for the report, Mr. Eden. Now we're on to the next, item number 9, the mid-year mooring program report. Mary, would you read the staff recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive and consider a staff report on the status of the department's East Beach mooring program, and B, review proposed amendments to City Council Resolution 09075 pertaining to rules and regulations for issuing mooring permits and setting minimum specifications for installing, inspecting, and repairing such moorings, and forward to City Council for adoption.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, established in 2006, our permitted mooring area, which you see on the slide here, consists of 46 mooring sites. They're owned by individual mooring permittees and inspected annually by city-approved inspectors. The inspection cost is borne by the permittees, who pay an annual permit renewal fee of $250 apiece. The City Council policy requires that any time a number of permittees hits 30 or fewer, the Waterfront Department shall undertake a new lottery to fill the vacant mooring sites. Lotteries like those were undertaken in 2006, 2007, 2010, and 2011, where vessels were assigned to various mooring sites. Owing to termination of mooring permits and/or some voluntary relinquishment of mooring permits during the past year, really year and a half, the current number of active permits is down to 26, which is the next slide shows occupancy of the current occupancy of the mooring area. What has happened is that even though you remember our last lottery, we had 45 applicants. What happens is we get to the point where they send in their permit application, then I meet individually with each of those persons who wants to have a mooring permit. Then they have 90 days to what we call prove up, to hire a mooring inspector to establish a mooring out there, have a vessel registered to the mooring site, the photos taken, registration demonstrated, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that in that 90-day period, a whole bunch of folks give up the ghost. A lot of folks have great intentions and dreams, if you will, and then reality sets in, and what has happened is there's a considerable amount of staff time eaten up and a considerable amount of wasted effort for only a couple of assignments. And so what we're going to propose are several recommendations to amend our current mooring resolution to address that particular problem, as well as some ancillary problems that you'll hear about in a moment. In the meantime, we've also had a problem with one particular kind of configuration in the mooring area. We've described it to you before. It's a configuration where the mooring is not your standard clump chain and mooring ball configuration. It's more consists of nylon bands that are, rubber bands that are nylon coated, nylon wrapped, and it's more of a bungee kind of system. I purposely avoid using the name of the company that makes those because there are a whole galaxy of reasons behind failures we've had of these kind of mooring systems out there, which we can't exactly put our finger on, whether it's the product, the installer, the non-compliance of the permittee, what have you. But the bottom line, unfortunately, is we've had 9 of those 12 systems fail on us. And the inspector who was approved by the city to install and inspect and repair those kinds of moorings dropped out of the program in 2010. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get folks who have those systems, which include, you remember the helix anchor, that's the embedment anchor that goes into the seafloor, which hasn't been part of the failure complex, if you will, to leave those in and get folks switched over to the catenary system of chain hooking directly to those anchors. They go up to the mooring ball. So we're working through some technical and administrative issues relative to that situation. It's been difficult. It's been difficult on the permittees. It's been challenging for waterfront staff, but we're doing everything we can to make a regime shift over to catenary systems from those C-Flex systems. Excuse me, there I did it. I went and named the producer. But those are just the folks who produce the equipment. That isn't to say that they have any fault whatsoever in the failures here. That's not for me to decide. But the point being, we don't intend to use these kind of rubber band mooring ball systems moving forward. We intend to get everybody now and future permittees on catenary systems with standard anchors or clump chain anchors and chain moorings. That being said, I'd like to offer up to you some of the amendments we're suggesting for Resolution 09075 that describes the mooring lotteries and the rules of the game, if you will, and the specifications for the moorings. First, this relates to what I was describing as our challenges moving through 30 or 40 permittees only to get 2 or 3 prove-ups. We're recommending that a non-refundable $50 application fee that would accompany any mooring permit application. This would limit the number of speculators participating in lotteries and applying for mooring permits and reduce staff time spent on applications that don't result in the issuance of permits. Only the serious folks would apply. The folks who had thought it through to the end would apply. I think this would be good for staff. I think it would be good for the program and good for the permittees. Second, very simple, we want to eliminate the reference to the grandfather lottery. Commissioner Kelly may be the only one who remembers from this board the grandfather lottery back in 2006. That's come and gone. That was a lottery intended to give an opportunity to individuals when the program started who had demonstrated a use of the East Beach anchorage during a certain window time preceding the program, first shot at the moorings, and that has come and gone, so we want to remove reference to that. Number 3, we'd like to amend language reflecting that any time the total number of mooring permits assigned to the mooring area declines to 30 or fewer, a lottery, we want to change the word to may be held instead of shall be held. For 2 reasons. Number 1, we'd like a little bit more latitude. I think I described for you some of the challenges we run up against, technical and administrative challenges that would speak to not immediately as soon as it gets to 30. Quite frankly, right now it's at 26, and I'm not before you asking to conduct another lottery until we get some of those problems worked out, get the area cleaned up, because I got some seafloor debris where some of these moorings have failed and are on the seafloor. We'd like some latitude in terms of conducting those lotteries. I don't think you want to be before us with lotteries every few months, and hopefully, number 1, requiring the $50 application fee will reduce the number of participants as well. But also, adding the word may instead of shall would be in keeping with existing language that says, and I quote, such lottery shall be conducted at the discretion of the waterfront department. So it would really only be underscoring that discretion. Certainly we're not going to let it dwindle down to 10 folks in the mooring area. We intend to utilize it to its fullest potential, hopefully getting 46 permittees out there someday, but we need to do it in a systematic and thoughtful fashion. And when we run into stumbling blocks, like we have with the ones we've described to you this evening, we need a little latitude and a little time and a little elbow room to straighten it out and do the right thing and get on the right track again. 4, we'd like to, this is really sort of not as substantive. We'd like to change the amount of time a permittee has to replace a sold or destroyed mooring from 90 days to 100 days. This is just to bring consistency with similar language we have for slip permittees. If they have a boat that's sold, lost, destroyed, wrecked by act of God or what have you, we want to give the mooring permittees a little more time to replace their vessel, because sometimes it takes time to find the right boat that suits your needs and suits the mooring you're on. And finally, we'd like to add language stating that if a permittee allows alterations or repairs to his or her mooring by persons not listed on our approved list of mooring inspectors, that we would add to our list of cause for termination, because it's not impossible that some of the moorings out in the mooring area are not as they were originally configured and installed by our city-approved inspectors. In conclusion, we're at the 5-year mark. It's still a work in progress. I think, we were out with the Department of Boating and Waterways Commission staff the other day, and we're moving through there and looking at it from east to west, or from east to west back at it. It's a great starting point. It's a good start. The 26 we got out there were laying beautifully on their moorings. They look perfectly spaced out. But we have some technical and administrative challenges we need to work through. But in the end, I think we're headed down the right road, and the program will be everything we want it to be. And that would conclude my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Before the questions, is there any public comment on this? We haven't received any slips, but there is a letter from Eric Schwartz, which he would read it himself if he were able to be here, and so I will read it for him. And it says, Dear Board of Commissioners, this is a brief informational report as to the current situation with 12 of the moorings in Santa Barbara mooring area. I represent the majority of the 9 mooring area permittees who have had mooring failures with C-Flex mooring systems. All failures in the mooring area since 2009 have been due to the use of the C-Flex system, and all were installed by U.S. mooring systems. Most, if not all, of these failures have been due to installer negligence. Some people have lost their moorings, and some have lost both their moorings and their vessels. The losses are adding up rapidly. We have been trying for several months to obtain from the Harbor Office the contact information for the remainder of the 12, 9 failed and 3 not yet failed, C-Flex mooring system owners. The Harbor has said it has not been able to provide this contact information since the city attorney has not had time to review our request, which was first presented in September. We need that information to complete analysis of the failures and proceed with recompense from the installer. Please do what you are able to assist us in this process. Thank you very much. Eric Schwartz, mooring number 42 for the group of 5 so far C-Flex mooring permittees. And he lists his phone number as 962-5614. And I repeat that this is his letter, not ours from me. And so, are there any comments or questions from the commissioners? I'll go down this way. Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Chair. I see this letter, and I personally view it as a Public Records Act request. So I would make a request to staff if they could forward this on under that premise. And whether or not that is the case, our city attorney can do it. But it's concerning to me that this request, according to the letter, was put in September, and it hasn't been answered. But I'm going to go by the date on the letter of today's date, the 19th, to the Commission as a Public Records Act request, and then all the timelines and everything, I leave it to city staff and the attorneys to follow up on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Bantalan.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Friedman. I just had one quick question on the application fee. The $50, is that full cost recovery? I'm just trying to compare that to the business activity permit fee that we imposed to be on the wait list, I believe, and I think that was $25 or $35. So just curious on the reason for the exact number.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bantalan, it's a standard application fee commensurate with other application fees in the ballpark of that, but no, it's not full cost recovery. Not for every time an individual submits a permit, I sit down with them either individually or if they're out of town and on the phone, and I walk them through the entire program and the nature of the permitting process. So no, it's not full cost recovery.
Commissioner Sloan.
How many moorings are converted over to the chain and ball system, the catenary system right now? Are there any?
We have, Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, we have 2 fully functional Helix, we have 2 fully functional C-Flex systems remaining, and we have 2 fully functional Helix to catenary systems. We have a total of 14 Helix anchors in the entire mooring area, and those, when new permittees are assigned to those, that'll be the primary vehicle for conversion. When we're trying to get them buoyed off and marked, and that's where that'll be the primary vehicle for conversion.
But so are we planning on converting all of the existing over in a fairly short time frame to the new, or what's the plan for implementing the?
What we're doing is we're leaving where there have been failures of this system that we've described and discussed here tonight, we're leaving the helix anchors in the seabed. There seems to be no indication that that component of the system is the source of failure. None that we can confirm anyway, okay? Because it's just not a perfect world out there. It's the open roadstead. And it's been difficult for any of us to ascertain exactly what has caused some of these failures, although opinions abound. We've left the helix anchors out there, and our intention is, as we assign new mooring permits, we will assign them to a certain spot that may have a helix anchor in there, and if it's marked, then that permittee will be able to be the fortunate beneficiary of the fact that the anchor part of the system is already embedded in the seafloor, and we'll just have to add the chain and mooring ball and pendant.
Okay, maybe.
I'm sorry,
I'm not asking the question right. So how many of the rubber band systems are there out there, and how many are the catenary systems out there? And is there a plan to change away from all of the existing rubber band systems?
There are 2 rubber band systems left out there intact and working. The rest are all catenary, or there are a couple hybrids of helix to catenary, okay? Our plan is to move away from all of them, though we didn't want to, mandate if an individual had a working rubber band system, of which there are really only 2 left, mandate that, you've got to get off of this and spend a bunch of money and change to, from A to B. We have added to our list of a city-approved inspectors a company that is capable and has history working with the rubber band systems, and they are all over these two that are out there, and they're paying very close attention to it. But in our view, we have no intention, and they're aware of this too, because they work in catenary systems as well, that we have no intention moving forward of putting any new rubber band installs out there. We're just crossing our fingers that the 2 that are out there with good maintenance and good inspections will remain, the integrity will remain good.
Great, thank you. That answered my question. And we have no plans of the city taking over responsibility for any of those moorings?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, no, that, in 2006, that was the staff's original recommendation to your board, but the Harbor Commission recommended, and it was a very popular notion at the time, and it remains a very solid notion that the mooring should be owned by individuals, not by the city. So there are no current plans for us to take the mooring area over. Though, like I say, we're still in the adolescent years of the mooring permit program.
Have we ever looked at using some of the open ones and putting our own in there and using them for transients at all? Has there been any thought given to that?
Commissioner Sloan, there has been, but the thought was that there was more liability, there was more risk than reward in that, and it would be hard to monitor who jumps on those, and it's another layer of enforcement and patrol and monitoring and administrative challenge and what have you. It's never really taken root. We had a mooring out there for a period of time that we used, like if there was a derelict vessel that was headed to the beach and we snatched it and we could put it on that mooring for a time. But we learned pretty quickly that even that had more risk than reward, because the boat would bash up against the mooring. It was a steel mooring, would bash up against the mooring, and the city elected to pull that mooring and not be part of the, remain as it is as a player in the mooring business as you see us today.
Great, all good points. Thank you, Mick.
Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. Mick, I meant to get this request to you earlier, and if this is too complicated, then just tell me so. I remember, and I don't remember what the components are, but could you, for the commission, just briefly, if you have it off the top of your head, what are the components that we use in the mooring system, and then what were the approved types of moorings that we actually, that a mooring permittee can select from?
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, I'm going to be generic on this because I don't have all the specifications in front of me. I don't think you want to hear all the detailed specifications. There are essentially two kinds. One is a catenary system that includes an anchor. It could be a railroad wheel, a clump chain of like 3-inch diameter, mooring chain from big ships that muds in very well, actually serves as a good anchor. To chain in various diameters up to a mooring ball with a pendant, a line going to the boat, and the boat lays on the mooring. The other alternative became generically known as the C-Flex system, but really the components are provided by a company called C-Flex. Our installer was U.S. Moorings, Inc., and that system consisted of the embedment anchor, the helical anchor with the blades that come out, and the main stock with an eye molded to the top, not welded, but molded as part of the configuration of the stock of the anchor, which sits barely above the seabed. And to that, a non-metallic device is shackled, and that device is really like a triple block, and it has these elastic bands coming up from it that instead of having to utilize a 5-to-1 rode, they utilize a 3-to-1 rode. In other words, the depth to the amount of line on the system is 3-to-1 as opposed to 5-to-1 with chain, and they operate on a sea kindly principle of working with the ocean, giving and taking, and that goes up to a mooring ball with a pendant to the vessel. The mooring ball can either be placed in water column or on the surface, depends on the configuration.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I have one comment, Mick. I'm a bit concerned that all discretion will be with the waterfront director in terms of having another lottery. Will you be reporting back to us and how this is going?
Madam Chair, certainly. Yeah, I will report to you regularly. I'm required as part of my management contract to bring you a semi-annual report. I think coming here every 6 months is about a good schedule unless you think differently, but I'd like to report out to you on the progress of the mooring area program every 6 months.
Okay, and you'll report back how many people are wishing to participate in,
Sure, I'll report the SIT stat, as they call it. I'll report the status of the mooring area program at the time I come to you, how many permits we have, when we expect to have a lottery, the outcome of this whole transition out of the rubber bands over to catenary, all of that.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
Commissioner Kelly.
Excuse me. I had one other question for you, Mick. There's a comment about vessels drifting off station, and I know that the Helix would probably be the only device that couldn't drift since it's basically drilled into the seafloor. Do we have much migration of any of our moorings?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, no, we don't. But just as a respectful correction, I'm not positive anything's not possible relative to the Helix coming out, because we've seen just about everything you could see out there in the mooring areas in terms of again, it's the open roadstead. There's a lot of, huge balls of kelp can be flying through mid-water column. Stray traps from a south swell from New Zealand can get yanked out of deep water and pulled into shallow water. But yeah, the answer to your question is no, we don't see much migration of the units at all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, just 2 points of clarification. The original mooring program did not include the rubber band method, or C-Flex, now that the cat's out of the bag. It came later after we incorporated and specified weights and methods of anchoring in the mooring area. The advantage to the system and the reason it was brought forward and it looked like a good deal was, as Mick was explaining earlier, it enabled you to have a shorter scope on your system, and so a smaller radius that the boat would be revolving and rotating in, whatever. So that was the advantage of the C-Flex, but obviously we've been having some issues there. The second point I wanted to make, I think Commissioner Bandelin pointed out, last year about this time we implemented a $25 fee in the charter business activity permit wait list, because we had this wait list of 20-something people that when they got there they weren't ready to accept the permit and they would request to be put at the bottom of the wait list, and we had this revolving door thing. And by adding a nominal $25 fee, we cleared out that wait list and got the permits in the hands of the people who wanted them and could use them. So it had I fully support this, the $50. It's a nominal application fee, but it sure worked well. It sure worked as intended when we had the Business Activity Permit Committee do this. So just 2 points there. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. And any comments from the commissioners? One other comment. I used to have a boat moored off Marblehead, and can appreciate that those who have boats on moorings expect certainty, and so this must be very, very concerning all around. And thank you for your report. And the next issue is item number 10, beach maintenance. And Mary, could you read the recommendation, please?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, unless I missed it, I believe you need to vote on the recommendation on number 9.
It just says it just receive and consider.
No, I believe you need to
Review.
vote on it, on moving it forward to City Council, unless I misunderstood.
Yeah, I think we do. And
Yeah.
I'll make that motion that we approve items 1 through 5 as recommended by staff.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is approved. Then the next is item number 10, beach maintenance. Could you read the recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a report on the city's beach maintenance program.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. At our November meeting, Commissioner Bandeland asked some questions about the city's beach grooming activities, and so I prepared a brief report on that this evening. I'd like to point out I'm joined by my colleague Santos Escobar, Parks Manager, who helped with the report a little bit, and it will be available to answer questions at the end of my report. There we go. The city's boundaries go from the Clark Estate all the way up to Arroyo Burro Beach, Henry's Beach, but the maintained beaches extend from Ledbetter Point down to the Clark Estate. It's about 2.9 miles of shoreline with over 40 acres of beaches. Hundreds of thousands of visitors come residents and visitors use these beaches every year, and there are 3 primary beaches. The first is Ledbetter Beach, which is located between the harbor and Ledbetter Point. Oops, excuse me, I want to back up. I just wanted to point out that Ledbetter Beach, I'm sorry, got to go back one. Ledbetter Beach was actually created after the harbor was built in 1930. And it's accreted sand, it's trapped up coast of the breakwater, and it varies, although it's stabilized by the harbor itself, it varies in width every year, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. The second beach is West Beach. It's located between the harbor and Stearns Wharf. It's in the wave shadow of the harbor and is the highest used beach that we have. It's really well protected. A lot of small craft navigate immediately offshore, and in the summertime there are hundreds of people on the beach just about every single day, especially when the sun comes out. And the third beach is East Beach, east of Stearns Wharf all the way down to the Clark Estate. It's the city's largest and longest beach. It's renourished by dredge spoils every year, and depending on how much dredge spoils there are and where they're deposited, the width of that beach varies considerably throughout the year. The Parks and Recreation Department is responsible for beach maintenance, and there are 3 components to beach maintenance: beach grooming, hand crew cleanup, as well as storm debris cleanup that comes around about every 5 years. There's 2 different types of beach grooming. The first is done with the Beach King. It's done for public safety and aesthetics. And this particular device, this yellow device you see in the back, sorts sand and debris. It's used mostly in the summer between April and August. And a minor correction to the report, it removes about 50 tons of trash every summer, not per month. So throughout the summer months, they average close to 50 tons of trash that's actually picked up and put in a hopper and taken to a recycling center for some of the material that they pick up. The other type of beach grooming is done with a tractor and a rake, and this is a great example of just what it looks like. You can see to the right footprints in the sand, minor depressions. The rake goes through and smooths it out. This is mostly done when the Beach King is unavailable, and done in the fall and winter, and it's done in high-use areas like the volleyball courts. It's used to smooth those areas out, and it removes litter in the summertime, but not quite as much as the Beach King, so we don't have any numbers on the amount of litter it removes. Hand crews are a key component of beach maintenance on our cities. They remove trash and debris a couple times a year. They remove up to 25 tons of debris annually, which is quite a bit by hand. They assist in beach vessel cleanup, and Mick's reported over the years on beach vessels that come in. We try to get the vessel operators to remove the boat. Sometimes we can't. A lot of times Parks takes care of it, and it's essential to have the hand crews out there because there's lots of little pieces that break up from a boat that goes aground. Additional efforts after large events, especially 4th of July and Parade of Lights, significant storms. We work closely with Parks after any fireworks show to go and pick up all the debris. That's something that's been of concern over the last few years. So it's been a nice collaboration. I think we've done a pretty good job keeping the beaches clean. And the final activity for beach maintenance, storm events. We haven't seen one in quite a while, since about 2005, but they can be extreme, up to 500 tons or more removed after a huge storm event. 2005 was the last pretty big year. I think that's what this image is from. Sometimes it's Public Works, Parks, and Waterfront working together. Occasionally they'll hire a contractor, and they'll pile all the debris up, as you can see, and then load it all out. And that can be a very, very costly endeavor. Coincident with most large storms to deposit that amount of debris is a local, state, and federally declared emergency. So frequently we have access to FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the state OES funds. So a lot of times there's cost recovery for those kind of activities. Beach maintenance is included in the city's sediment management plan, and the sediment management plan was established in 2000. It was really to deal with dredging outside of the federal channel, and that's some dredging off of West Beach, dredging in and around the Sandspit and Breakwater. And in 2005, because of permitting issues, we included beach grooming, beach maintenance, storm drain outlet maintenance. There's, I think, 9 storm drain outlets on the beaches that need to be cleaned out every year right before it rains, and moving lifeguard towers around. So as regulatory agencies got more involved and reviewed our program, we felt it prudent to include these things just to make sure they were covered so we could continue to conduct these operations. There are 5 primary agencies that regulate what happens on the beaches: our City Planning Department, our State Lands Commission, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the Coastal Commission. The first set of permits were obtained in 2000. There were new 5-year permits in 2006. And we recently received 10-year permits for most of these agencies. There's a couple agencies we need to go back to. So it's been a very consistent project, but it's quite a bit of effort to get permits. CEQA has to be done, or was done originally, and amended as appropriate, which is California Environmental Quality Act. It's environmental review. And it's nice that we can receive these long-term permits and continue with this program. There are 75 permit conditions for the entire sediment management plan, and 21 of those pertain specifically to beach maintenance. And a lot of them have to do with biological resource protection. Kelp is a resource that's very valuable to birds. We're required to do bird surveys and eelgrass surveys as well. We're also required to put up interpretive signs for beach wrack. Wrack is a term you'll commonly hear referring to really decomposing kelp on the beaches. And you'll see there's, I think, 20 of these located between Ledbetter Point and all the way down to the Clark Estate. Beach wrack is just essentially this band of kelp that's deposited at every kind of high tide, and it decomposes there, and it really provides a major food source for a lot of different shorebirds. The permit conditions require that all beach grooming activities be done 10-foot set back from what we call the rack line, which you can see is kind of an uneven line at that high tide area, up on the dry beach. No beach grooming can occur in the intertidal area, which is the water side or the seaward side of it, or in the rack itself. It's important to note that there are many, many different types of shorebirds that work here, that live here, in addition to sensitive species such as snowy plovers and least terns. And Chair Kramer has some experience with us protecting snowy plovers many years ago when I first started here. So any sensitive species or habitat or a food source that's relied on by these species is protected pursuant to all our different permits. But there are some constraints with these permits as well. We're not allowed to work in kelp, and we're not allowed to work in standing water. And so occasionally we'll get a condition, this is a picture of Ledbetter Beach from a couple of weeks ago, whereby we have a very high tide and a very high swell, and there's a large permanent kelp bed directly off of Ledbetter Beach. When you get a combination of those conditions, high tides and high swells, you get a lot of the kelp itself to wash all the way to the back beach itself, not just the rack line. And you get a lot of standing water. So there really can be no beach, not so much beach maintenance, but beach grooming in this area until the kelp decomposes, the water drains out, and it's typically a wintertime condition. By the time summer comes around, things stabilize. So although Ledbetter Beach may not be groomed for a little while as this condition abates, by the time summer comes around, it'll be part of the beach grooming program again. In summary, it's important to point out this is a Parks and Recreation Department activity. Santos is here to help answer any questions you may have this evening. They budget $146,000 annually out of the general fund. There are close to 100 tons of trash and debris removed every year. In storm years, it's significantly more to that. And it's important to point out that beach maintenance is done to the extent that's allowed by permits. So the Parks and Recreation Department does everything they can to keep our beaches clean and safe, but there are some limits. And this concludes my report this evening. Santos and I are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Carl, for that report. Questions, comments? Commissioner Vantillen.
I just wanted to say thank you, Carl, for bringing this, and Santos for coming and sitting through the rest of our meeting. Might have been a little harsh when I brought it up last time, but I understand some of the restrictions, and I think you guys do a good job with what you have, so I appreciate that. And sorry, actually, just one follow-up question. Is the budget stable? I think it was 140-something thousand. Is that anticipated to remain pretty much the same?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, that's correct with the status quo budget for FY13. That's where it lies.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Sloan.
Does the building of the berm, is that part of this as well for the parking lot right outside the yacht club there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, actually the berm in front of the yacht club is its own separate permit. It's not even part of the sediment management plan, and it's another 10-year permit. We do put up a berm near Mission Creek every year, and that is part of the sediment management plan. Berms are done by the Waterfront Department to protect our assets, and the beach maintenance is done by Parks. That's the division of labor.
Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Santos and staff. Is an informative report, and I want to thank Commissioner Vantillen for bringing it forward. I know there's some individuals and other teams down there that paddling teams that have questions about how this works, so I'll be sure to pass this on to them. And I was going to say thanks for getting rid of a ton of trash, but by my math, it's closer to 100 tons every year. So appreciate all the work that you and the city staff and the Parks and Rec staff do. And one question I do have in terms of what types of community volunteer, like Adopt a Beach programs do we have, and how often are those used? I know they're not large scale like this, but they can pick up smaller items and get the community to be more aware of it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, regarding volunteerism on the beach, that's more than welcomed. We do go through and work with our Creeks Division that goes through and helps us out because they are part of our Parks and Recreation Department. And so you could actually go through and make contact with the Creeks Division, and they could actually sign individual folks up. We do have folks that will work on the beach on a weekly basis, specifically on the weekends. And so we want to thank all those folks that do come out and help us out. We do have youth groups that actually work together with other with the schools and such, and so they work closely with us as well to make that happen. So any volunteer work that folks want to help us out, that would be greatly appreciated.
So you could have like any type of group organization, not just individuals, contact the Creeks Division, and if they wanted to come out on any given weekend or for a few hours to come down there and pick out a beach and then work with city staff and then work with properly disposing and everything, and they can contact City Creeks on that?
Yeah, and that's correct. They can make contact with City Creeks, or they can actually just call me as well, and we can make contact with these folks to help us out. You know, our Parks Division office number is 564-5433, and then we can connect folks with the appropriate staff. And you are correct in regards to working with us. You know, we go through and do initial safety training. We go through and explain where we like folks to deposit trash. We give them plastic bags. We go through and give them plastic gloves and such. And you know, we at times we could have large groups, and then our staff will actually go out and work with them as well. So it's a win-win for everybody within our community to keep our beaches not only safe but clean as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Spicer.
And just one quick follow-up. I've worked with some national and beach cleanup days type things. Does the Parks and Rec Department work in conjunction with those, or is that a separate entity altogether?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, that is correct. We work hand in hand with those organizations as well.
Thank you very much for the reports, and also thank you, Mr. Santos, for being here. And specific thanks for the attention to the rack and for pointing that out, as not only are the snowy plovers particularly threatened, but all seabirds, shorebirds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and so it's important that people be aware of that, and that's why there is the rack on the beach. I know that the people do complain about it, but it's an important part of Santa Barbara marine environment. So thank you for your report. The next item is a final item of the commission staff communications, and are there any communications from the staff? From
Madam Chair, nothing from staff this month.
Mr. Friedman, Commissioner Friedman.
Since we have a new commissioner, I'd like to put on the agenda for next month to look at our committee assignments for next month, so we can put that on the agenda.
Anyone else? Then I guess it's time for a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.